Hi guys, this is Tech Howdy. I welcome you to another video tutorial on ASP.NET Core 2.2 Web API and Angular 7. This is the part 3 of our video tutorial for creating our account service. And in this video tutorial, we will be continuing to code our login method. In the last video tutorial, we stopped at a point where we created our login method. And now we will continue coding the functionality of this method. So in the last video tutorial, as I told you, we are using the HTTP object to call the web API method using the post request, and we are passing the base URL, that is the URL of our API, and the data, that is the username and password, so that these details can be validated by our web API method, and it can return as a response if the user details are valid or it is invalid. So now let's write our code to handle the response that we get from this call. So now as we are going to write our functionality for login method, first thing we need to understand is why we have used this pipe method. The pipe method helps us to combine multiple functions into a single function. So if we have multiple functions over here, like function to handle the success response, which means if the user data is valid, so we can redirect the user to our home page. Then we will write a function for handling the success response. If the response is an error or a failure, which means that the user details are invalid, then we will write another function that will execute and redirect the user back to login page because his details are invalid. So we will have multiple functions inside this pipe method, and the pipe method combines these functions and then executes them in a sequence, which means first the function 1, then the function 2, and then the function 3. So I hope now it is clear that why we are using pipe method here on our HTTP post method that we are calling. So now let's go ahead and code our method. Now the first method that we want to use inside our pipe method is the map method or the map operator. Now what does the map operator help us to do? The map operator will help us to manipulate the result that is received by this HTTP method call. So this HTTP method will return a result. The result can be an error or the result can be a success result, and if it is a success result we will get a success message with the username, with the JWT token, and with the user role. Now what the map is going to do is it's going to take that result and convert it into an array of key value pairs. Since the object that is returned by the HTTP method call, it's going to be a single object. So when we receive the result, it's going to be a single object. It's not going to be received as a key value pair. So we are not going to receive any values like the username, and it's going to be admin, and the user role, it's going to be as administrator. We will not receive these values separately. All we are going to receive is a single object that will contain all these values. Now we need to break down that object and convert it into an array of key value pairs so that we can use it inside our method to validate the user or to redirect the user based on his user role. So to do that, what we want to do is we want to use the map operator. The map method or the map operator will return a new array containing the result. So it will convert the result into a new array of key value pairs. So let's see how it does that. So the first thing that we want to do is go ahead and add our import statement to import map from RxJS operators. Doing this will help us to use map operators or map method inside our pipe method. Next thing inside the map method that we want to do is the result that we receive, that is the object that we received, we need to break it down into an array. So we are going to use some lambda expression here. So I'm going to create an object that will hold the result, and I'll call it as result. Now you can call this object anything that you want. You can call it R, you can call it anything that you like, but to make more sense, I'm going to call it result because that's what we are going to receive by this method call. Now inside these curly braces, we have to write what we want to do with the result we received. So the first thing that we want to check if the user's login was successful, and if it was successful, this result will definitely contain a JWT token. So let's go ahead and write a condition that will verify if the result contains a token and if we have a result. So our result is not null basically. We have a result and we have a token inside that result. So let's add the condition. So here's a condition which will verify if the result is not null. Basically, we have a result and the result contains a token. Now, if this condition is true, here we are going to store the user details and the JWT token inside the local storage, that is the web storage of our browser. You can also use session storage inside your browser's web storage to store these user related details, but I recommend you to use local storage because if the browser or a new window is open, the user will still stay logged in because the details will be accessible in local storage. If we open a new window and we have saved the user's details inside a session cookie or session storage, then the new window cannot access the details of the other window, that is the other browser window. So based on your company's requirements or based on your project's requirement, you can use either local storage or session storage to store the user's details. Once the browser is closed, the details or the storage info will be erased if it's a session storage. So please make sure that you do it accordingly as per your needs. So first thing that we want to do here is we want to change the status, that's it, change the login status to true so that the other components that are requesting the value of login status know that the user has logged in and his details have already been validated. So let's do that. Since our login status is a observable type of it's an observable type, so it's returning an observable data type. So we cannot set its value to true like this. And we obviously are going to get an problem here. And see, we see there's an error and it says we cannot assign true to behavioral subject because it's an observable type. It's not a regular Boolean. And to do that, to assign it the value of true, we will call the dot next method on our behavioral subject, which is available under the behavioral subject observable type. And inside the next method, we can set the value of true or false for our Boolean. So we will set the value of login status to true by calling the next method. Now this login status value is changed to true because the user details are valid. Next we want to do is inside the local storage, we want to store the login status so that the web pages or the components can access it. Now we cannot store a Boolean inside the local storage and therefore we can either store it as a string. So to do that, what we want to do is go ahead and first of all call the local storage method. Then to store the value of login status, we will use the set item. And here inside the setItem method, we need to provide a key for our value that we want to store, and it should be a string. So let's call this as login status. That's the key. And the value, once again, as you see here, IntelliSense shows that it should be string. It cannot be Boolean or it cannot be an integer. So it has to be string. So let's store it as 1, the number 1. So if the user is logged in, the value of the user will be stored as 1 with the key of login status. Now, the next item that we want to store inside the local storage is the JWT token that we receive. So let's give it a key of JWT, and here we want to store the token. Now a token is inside the result that we received. So let's go ahead and call the result object, and then by hitting dot, we will specify that we want to save the token object from that result. Now the reason why I have used token, because inside the web API method in my ASP.NET controller, the account controller, when my login is successful, I am returning a token. That's why I have used the dot token property to store or to get the value from the result. If you have used some other property like token, or you have used key or anything like that, then make sure you use the same property name here. So if it was key, so you will use key. If it was secret, then you will use secret, and so on. Since I have used the property name as token, I'm going to keep it token. So hope this is clear now. Next thing in the result that we need to store is the username, the expiration time of the token, and the user's role. So let's go ahead and add that as well. So I've added 3 more values inside the local storage, and I have set their keys as username, expiration, and user role. And I have set the value of username and the user role and the expiration. Now, if I go back to my account controller, to my login method, I have used the property names exactly how they are specified here in the return of a successful response. So make sure you use the same property names and don't change them, otherwise you would not be able to access the value from result. So now the next thing that we want to do is finally return the result. So if the result is success, or if the result contains a token, we are first going to add all the values to the local storage that we require, and then finally we are going to return the result. So if it is an error, then you might be wondering how we are going to handle this error. So we will handle this error inside our login component. Since now we have a result, and if the result will contain an error, we will handle that error inside login component. So now that should be it for this login method, and let's go ahead and code our logout method for this account service, which can be used when the user clicks on the logout button. So let's go ahead and call this method as logout, and the logout method will be fairly simple because all we want to do is clear all these existing items in local storage so that when the user logs back in, these items can be added once again. So let's go ahead and add the required method to remove our local storage items. So I've added the code to remove the local storage items. That's the token, the user role, the username, the expiration time, and the login status. I have changed it to 0 from 1, and I've also changed the login status to false. So if you want to remove any item from local storage, you will use the .remove item method, and you will supply the key of the item that you want to remove. So in this case, we wanted to remove the JWT token, and the key to access that value is JWT. So we used JWT in the remove item method, and so on for all other properties. Now finally, after we have removed all items from our local storage, we want to redirect the user to our login page. So he clicks on the logout button, he is logged out from the application, and then we redirect him to the login page. And to redirect the user to the login page, we would need to make use of one more module, and that module will be the router module. So our router module will help us to route the user to our login page. So let's go ahead and add the import statement to import router module. So here I'm going to import the router module from Angular router, and I'm going to instantiate this object, router object, inside the constructor of my account service class. So I'm going to call it private router, and it's going to be available inside the router module. That's it, and all I have to do is use this router object. We navigate the user back to the login page, and by passing the login route to the navigate method. After that, all we want to do is just, if you wish to, you can console.log a message saying that the user logged out successfully. So I can just add this message here so that we can see it inside the console of our browser. So that's it for our logout method. Now finally, we have to also make sure that the other components can access these properties since they are private, and if we try to access it from login component, we would not be allowed to do so because these properties are private. So let's create some getters so that we can get the values of these properties and supply them to other components that they are requesting these values. So if I want to supply the value of the login status to other components, I'm going to create a property here. So I'm going to say get, and I'm going to call the property as is logged in. And all I'm going to do is return the login status. Since it is an observable type, I'm going to use the asObservable method to return the value of login status. Now inside the components, we can just call this getter, and by calling the isLoggedIn getter, we can get the value of the login status. Similarly, to get the value of username and roles, we will add two more getters, that is for current username and for current user role. All we are doing is returning the value of username and user role as observable inside other components so they can use these values. So now we have created the login method, the logout method, added some properties here so that other components can access the values of our observable types. And one thing that's remaining inside the account service is to create our register method. Since we have not yet created our register component view, we will do that once we have created the register component view. Now the next thing that we want to do in the next video tutorial is use this login method inside our login component to code the functionality so that when the user clicks on the login button and if his credentials are valid, we can redirect him to the home page, and if not, we can display the error to the user. So let's end this video tutorial here. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe my channel. Tech Howdy.